In the town of Millbrook, Ohio, there was a small shop on the corner of 4th and Elm with a bell above the door that rang every time someone walked in. The sign above the window said Whitfield's Clock and Watch Repair, and behind the counter for 45 years stood a man named Elias Whitfield. Elias was not a man anyone would have noticed twice. He was thin, with careful hands and round wire glasses that slid down his nose when he leaned over his workbench. He wore the same grey cardigan through 3 different decades, mending the elbows himself rather than buying a new one. He spoke softly, and he rarely spoke first. Customers came to him with broken pocket watches passed down from grandfathers, cuckoo clocks that had stopped chiming, wristwatches with cracked crystals, and he fixed them all with the same quiet patience, charging fair prices that never seemed to change no matter how many years went by. He had learned the trade from his own father, who had learned it from his father before him, back in a workshop in Pennsylvania where the smell of oil and brass polish never quite left the floorboards. As a boy, Elias would sit on an upturned crate beside his father's bench, watching tiny gears spin under a jeweler's loupe, learning long before he understood it that patience was not a virtue people talked about, it was simply a tool, the same as any screwdriver or tweezer in the drawer. When Elias was 22, he packed a single suitcase, said goodbye to his father, and took a bus west until he found a town that felt right. Millbrook, Ohio was small enough that everyone knew the postman by name, and it had no watchmaker of its own. He rented the little shop on 4th and Elm for $18 a month, cleaned the dust from the front window himself, and hung his sign the same week. He married a schoolteacher named Ruth 2 years later, a woman with a laugh that carried down the block and a habit of correcting people's grammar without meaning to. Together they lived in a modest house on Poplar Street with a porch swing that Elias oiled every spring so it would never creak, and a garden Ruth tended with the same quiet devotion Elias gave his workbench. They never had children of their own, though Ruth often said the whole town felt like family. Elias worked 6 days a week, closing only on Sundays, and every evening he walked home the same route, past the hardware store, past the diner, past the church with the crooked steeple, arriving just as the streetlights flickered on. What almost nobody in Millbrook knew was that Elias had a second habit, one just as steady as his work at the bench. Every month, without fail, he set aside a portion of what the shop earned. In the early years it was small, sometimes only a few dollars, but he never skipped a month, not once. He opened an account with a broker 2 towns over and began buying shares in a broad market index fund, the kind that simply tracked the performance of hundreds of American companies rather than betting on any single one. He did this in 1969, when the fund was still a strange new idea that most people had never heard of. He kept doing it through the inflation and stagnation of the 1970s. When prices at the grocery store seemed to climb every week, and his neighbors grumbled about a stock market that could not seem to get out of its own way, men would come into the shop to have a watch battery replaced and end up complaining for 20 minutes about gas lines and interest rates, and Elias would nod and fix their watch and say nothing about the small envelope he mailed to his broker every month, regardless of what the newspapers said. He kept doing it in October of 1987, when the market fell more than 20% in a single day, and the radio announcers used words like panic and collapse. Ruth asked him once, standing in the kitchen with the newspaper spread across the table, if they should stop, if they should pull the money out and keep it safe under the mattress instead. Elias only shook his head and kept polishing the coffee cup in his hand. Clocks run down and wind back up, he told her. So does everything else, if you're patient enough to let it. He kept contributing through the savings and loan crisis, through the recession of the early 90s when half of 4th Street's storefronts sat empty for a season, through the dot-com boom when his neighbors bragged over coffee about doubling their money in internet companies that made no profit at all and had never sold a single product. Elias did not chase those stocks. He did not know what half of those companies even did, and he never pretended to. He simply kept buying the same broad index, the same unglamorous basket of hundreds of businesses, month after month, the way he wound the grandfather clocks in his shop, turning the key just enough, never more, never less. When the dot-com bubble burst in 2000 and those same neighbors watched their gains evaporate, Elias's account dipped too, but it did not vanish because he owned a small sliver of nearly everything. Not a fortune staked on a handful of untested companies. He kept working, he kept fixing watches, he kept setting money aside. In 2008, the financial crisis arrived like a winter storm nobody had forecast. Banks failed, neighbors lost homes, the evening news showed men in suits carrying cardboard boxes out of glass towers. Their careers ended in a single afternoon. Down at the diner, talk turned from weather to layoffs, and more than one customer came into the shop that year not to fix a watch, but simply to sell one, needing whatever cash it might bring. Elias bought none of them, but he fixed a few for free, quietly, without mentioning it to anyone. In 2008, the financial crisis arrived like a winter storm nobody had forecast. Banks failed. Neighbors lost homes. The evening news showed men in suits carrying cardboard boxes out of glass towers. Their careers ended in a single afternoon. Down at the diner, talk turned from weather to layoffs, and more than one customer came into the shop that year not to fix a watch, but simply to sell one, needing whatever cash it might bring. Elias bought none of them, but he fixed a few for free, quietly, without mentioning it to anyone. His own account fell by nearly 40% that year, a number that would have frightened most people into selling everything and locking the rest away for good. Ruth was frightened. She asked him twice that winter if this was the time to stop, if this was different from 1987. Elias was not frightened. He sat at the kitchen table with his ledger, the same ledger he had kept since 1969, its cover worn soft at the corners, and he simply wrote in his neat, careful hand, "Contribution as usual." He did not sell a single share. He did not check the balance more than once a month, the same as always. 2 years later, when the market recovered and then climbed past where it had started, he was still contributing, still winding the key, exactly as he had for 40 years by then. Ruth passed away quietly in 2015 after 48 years of marriage, and Elias grieved the way he did everything else, privately, without complaint, tending her garden himself from then on because he could not bear to let it go wild. Neighbors said he seemed to age 10 years that winter, though he never missed a day at the shop. He kept working even as his hands grew slower and his eyesight dimmer, training a young apprentice named Marcus, who had wandered in one summer looking for a part-time job and stayed for 6 years, fascinated by the old man's patience and the quiet, unhurried order of his workbench. Elias taught him to disassemble a movement without losing a single screw, to listen to a clock's tick and know within a heartbeat what was wrong with it, and, though he rarely said it outright, to understand that the shop's true value had never been in the register, but in doing the same honest thing. Well, for a very long time. In March of 2020, when the pandemic closed half the shops on 4th Street and the stock market fell faster than it ever had before, dropping more than 30% in a matter of weeks, Elias was 83 years old. Marcus, worried for him, asked if he was following the news, if he understood how bad things looked. Elias only nodded and kept polishing a pocket watch case with a soft cloth. "The market has fallen before," he said. "It has always found its way back up. My job is only to keep it fed while it does." He did not touch his account. He kept his monthly contribution running on autopilot, the same as it had been for over 50 years. By the end of that year, the market had not only recovered, it had climbed to new heights. Elias Whitfield died in his sleep in the autumn of his 89th year, in the same small house on Poplar Street where he and Ruth had spent their whole married life. Marcus found him the next morning when he came by to check on him, having not seen him open the shop. The town gathered for a modest funeral at the church with the crooked steeple, and most people who came remembered him simply as the quiet man who fixed their grandfather's watch, or their mother's mantel clock, never late on a promise, never overcharging a dime. It was only when the town's lawyer opened Elias's will that Millbrook learned the truth. 53 years of steady, unglamorous contributions to a broad market index fund, left untouched through every crash, every recession, every season of fear that had sent other men running for the exits, had grown into a sum that made the lawyer read the number twice to be certain he had it right, then a third time aloud to the small room just to hear how strange it sounded next to the name of a man everyone had known simply as the watchmaker. Elias Whitfield, who wore the same mended cardigan for 30 years, who never once raised his prices out of greed and never once missed a monthly contribution out of fear, had quietly amassed $2,361,000. His will left almost none of it to himself, since by then he had no need of it. Instead, he left the bulk of the fortune to establish a scholarship fund for Millbrook's graduating students who wanted to learn a trade, whether that meant watchmaking, carpentry, plumbing, or any craft that took patience to master. He left a smaller sum to keep the town library open on Sundays, since Ruth had always wished it could be. And he left the shop itself, along with his workbench and every tool on it, to Marcus with a single handwritten note tucked inside the ledger. The note read simply that the secret had never been complicated. Save a little every month. Let it sit. Do not touch it when it frightens you. Time does the rest, the same as it does for every watch that only needs winding and patience to keep true. Marcus kept the shop open. He kept the sign above the window exactly as it was, and the same $18 rent that had somehow, over the decades, never once been raised by the landlord who remembered Elias fondly. And on the counter, under glass, he placed the old ledger, open to its final page, so that anyone who wandered in with a broken watch might glance down and see 53 years of small, quiet numbers that had added up to something no one in Millbrook had ever imagined possible from a man who asked for so little. The town never forgot the lesson Elias Whitfield left behind. Wealth, real wealth, rarely announces itself. It does not wear a loud suit or drive a loud car or brag at the diner counter about a stock tip. Sometimes it wears a mended grey cardigan, fixes your grandfather's watch for a fair price, keeps a ledger nobody ever asks to see, and quietly, patiently, without ever seeking credit or applause, changes the lives of everyone who comes after it. All it ever needed in the end was 53 years, a steady hand, and the simple refusal to stop winding the key.